What is the greatest overtake in Formula 1 history? I asked you lot on my community page, got a bunch of varied takes, and something dawned on me. Two of the most requested picks weren't just in the same year, but in the exact same race, split by just 34 laps. Then I watched the race back and discovered there's a third absolute worldie. So let's talk about him. The story of Suzuka 2005, where Fernando Alonso and Kimi Raikkonen nailed three of arguably the very best overtakes in Formula 1 history. Also, Minton was hanging around, so I thought he could say hi. Hello, mate. It's the 2005 Japanese Grand Prix, the penultimate round of the season, round 18 of 19. Fernando Alonso had already mathematically won the championship after the round prior at Sao Paulo. Kimi Raikkonen was a comfortable P2 in the standings, nowhere near Fernando, but clear of P3. That was Michael Schumacher in his Ferrari, who before this race was level on points with Kimi Raikkonen's McLaren teammate Juan Pablo Montoya. However, there was something to fight for. McLaren and Renault were split by just 2 points in the constructors' standings going into this race. Now, in classic Suzuka fashion, come Saturday for qualifying, it absolutely lashed down. The rain flipped the grid on its head. Ralf Schumacher took pole in his Toyota, just 4/100ths clear of Jenson Button in his Honda. An all-Japanese constructor front row. Good vibes. Fernando was starting way down in P16, Michael was starting P14, and Kimi Raikkonen P17. Giancarlo Fisichella in his Renault was starting P3, so this was a fantastic opportunity for him to take what only would have been his second race win of the season after winning the opener in Australia. Overtake number 1, Fernando Alonso on Michael Schumacher. Both Michael and Fernando had corking starts. They were up to P7 and P8 respectively by the end of the first lap. Kimi's teammate Juan Pablo Montoya wasn't so lucky. He shunted at the very end of the first lap. That brought out the safety car with the race resuming on lap 7. Now, Fernando was able to hold right onto the gearbox of Michael Schumacher for a few laps, but he was struggling to get a move done. And that was made more difficult for Fernando because he'd passed Christian Clean earlier in the final chicane, but it was deemed an illegal overtake because he did essentially cut the corner and didn't properly give the position back. So he had to drop back from Michael, let Christian through, and then re-overtake, and then re-catch up to Michael, which is exactly what he did. That Renault was clearly a much quicker car than the Ferrari on this day. It was one tyre for the entire race back in 2005. No tyre changing mid-race, which hit the Bridgestone runners a lot harder than the Michelin ones. Come lap 16, there was a glorious quote from Martin Brundle that wasn't in line with the overtake, but there was a degree of foreshadowing here for sure. As they both passed through Spoon Corner with Fernando still behind Michael, Martin said,
"The only way Alonso's going to get Michael Schumacher around this track is follow him through the 190 mile an hour, 130 hour corner and drill him up the inside."
Interesting choice of words there, Martin.
Into the final chicane.
So, 3 laps later, lap 19, with eventual race winner Kimi Raikkonen, spoiler alert, breathing down his neck, Fernando got the run on Michael he was waiting for out of Spoon Corner, heading towards 130R. But he didn't listen to Martin. He didn't drill him up the inside of the final chicane. I'm sorry, I'm a child. No, he got it done on 130R itself. And to preface, yes, in these modern generation of cars, Charles Leclerc can do 130R while holding onto his rear view mirror, right? But back then, there wasn't anywhere near the aerodynamic grip that there is now. There weren't the slick tyres that you have now. It was much more of a challenging, brave corner. Nowadays, it doesn't really count as a corner, to be honest, which is a shame. Pulled this move at, 180 at least, maybe 190 miles an hour. Absolute faith, not only in the car that's underneath you and yourself to pull it off, but the other driver as well. He needed Michael to play ball. If Michael had left the nose in there, that is going to be one hell of a disgusting crash. And especially given how small the cars were back in this era of Formula 1, the agility, you watch the images and it looks so good. It looks so audacious. It looks so brave, it looked so risky, and it was. Fernando could have waited for the chicane and got the move done pretty easily. He could have waited for turn 1. He clearly had a big pace advantage, but the confidence that Fernando had in the car underneath him to do it there was just madness. James Allen was losing his mind on the comms. You could tell Brundle's still talking on the comms about the move in quite a, toned down way. And then as soon as Martin stops, James Allen is just like 180 miles an hour. What helped out Fernando as well is because Kimi was right on the back of his gearbox. Then when he got the move done on Michael in 130R, Kimi was right there on the back of Schumacher. Michael immediately had to be in his mirrors, which allowed Fernando to somewhat, take off ahead and not have to worry about Michael re-overtaking him. You know what kind of the sad thing about this move is though? It was kind of for nothing because Fernando got the move done, got ahead, but then he pitted. Michael and Kimi stayed out. Kimi got a bit stuck behind Michael, but they stayed out a little bit longer. And then when they both eventually pitted on lap 27, they both ended up leapfrogging Alonso. So it was great, but it was kind of all for nothing. Overtake number 2, Fernando Alonso on Mark Webber. Yes, the pit stops hadn't been kind to him, but he did eventually get back past Michael on lap 32, did Fernando. It was a 2-stop for pretty much everyone in this race, but with the advantage that Kimi had and Fernando in terms of pace. They did both gradually make their way through the field. Up until 5 laps to go, Fernando found himself P4 behind Mark Webber, back in his Williams, sat P3, taking the final position on the podium. Going through 130R, Mark is ahead of Fernando. Chicane, they're both taking uncompromised lines. They both look good, but Mark gets a little bit squirrely on exit. Fernando gets his traction down seemingly quite a bit better. So gets somewhat of a run on Mark, but you look at it and you think, well, he's not right on his gearbox. He's close, but is he close enough to get a move done into turn 1? However, Fernando on this day didn't get that memo. Passing the pit straight, Mark kind of eked his car over to the right just to try and show Fernando to the outside line, right? A little bit trickier to get the move done, arguably around the outside. However, Fernando wasn't having any of it. He picked his line, he wanted to go down the inside, and he made sure he got alongside Mark Webber. He even took somewhat to the grass just before the braking zone. Super sketchy, but he kept it together. He didn't look like he was going to lose control. The way Fernando pulled off this move, if this is going for the race win, which is maybe an overtake we're going to look at shortly, I think this move gets remembered so much more. Because it was fighting for a P3, it doesn't quite have that same romanticism, nostalgicness to it. Mark couldn't really have done too much more on the defence. Yes, maybe in hindsight he could have squeezed over to the right a little bit more, but then it would have been a pretty comfortable overtake around the outside for Fernando. This is one of the fastest parts of the track alongside 130R. Turn 1 at Suzuka is not a simple corner. You're putting plenty of steering lock on as you go on the brakes, which is difficult. It's very easy to lock a tyre. It's very easy to understeer. We saw that with Barrichello and Sato at the start, both understeering at turn 1, going straight off into the gravel. Fernando was compromised into turn 1, still made the move stick. What a worldie of an overtake, one that I think is forgotten, so I'm here to bring it back to life. But then overtake number 3, Kimi Räikkönen on Giancarlo Fisichella. Like I said at the start, this was a great opportunity for Fizzy to deliver a win, right? He started P3. It was looking pretty good. Ralf Schumacher's pace kind of fell off a cliff. Toyota ran him light on fuel off the line. It was probably a bit of a marketing exercise just to get pole position, even though there was going to be no race pace. You could argue maybe the same for Jenson Button in his Honda. They both fell down the pack. Fisichella pitted from the lead with 15 to go. And then Kimi, who had made his way all the way up to P2 by this stage, pitted with 8 to go. The gap was around about 7 seconds by the time Kimi came out of the pits. So about a second a lap Kimi needed to make on Fisichella in order to get a shot at getting the move done. The penultimate run through 130R, similar in a way to Fernando and Mark, similar distance between Fisichella and Räikkönen. However, you gotta say, Fisichella, looking back at it, must have been really frustrated with himself because he overly defended the entrance to the chicane. This compromised line puts Kimi right on his gearbox, quite significantly closer than Fernando was to Webber when he got the move done into turn 1. However, Fisichella put up quite a bit more of a fight and it almost ended up very nasty because, Giancarlo sent Kimi to the inside before then making a little jink to the right to then really close off that space. I don't know if he had to get out of it necessarily, but then Kimi had to adjust. He had to go for the outside line going into turn 1. And again, this is all at about 180, if not more, miles an hour. And even though he was having to be really reactive to Fisichella and they came really close to touching wheels, Kimi was still able to absolutely nail the braking zone and just swing it round the outside. A beautiful move for P1 on the last lap. P17 to P1. By the way, we talk about how impressive Max's P14 to P1 at Spa last year was. Well, this is the record. Furthest place back to then go on and win a race. Kimi retains that record to this day. So what's your favourite out of these 3 overtakes? And what to you makes a great overtake? Is it late braking? Is it dummying the other driver? Is it speed and danger? Because I think all these three are actually quite similar. It's all kind of about having the bollocks to get the move done. The speed, but also the control that the driver's preserved for all of these overtakes is what makes them mostly impressive, I think. I'm not sure what I'd pick. I definitely think the Fernando one and Mark Webber's very underrated. That one gets looked over a lot because of the two other absolute worldy overtakes we had. But I would say Kimi for the race win with Fisichella not playing ball that much and giving him something to think about. For me, that's probably my favourite of these three. Plus, that generation Kimi Räikkönen it's got a special place in my heart. He was so good back then. My name's Tommo. Thanks again. Have a good one. Ta-da.